And gentlemen, today's lesson that we're going to be talking about is how do I calculate the area of a triangle. Now remember, the area is the space inside a two-dimensional figure. So I'm thinking about, if I were thinking about typical problems, it'd be the floor of your classroom, it'd be the walls, it'd be the space on your poster, the different sides on your cereal box. Those are all examples of area. In 3D, we call it surface area. But right now we're going to be talking about the area of one side, a flat two-dimensional figure. And just as a quick review, what we're going to be looking at is just another problem here with the rectangle here. We have a rectangle that is 14 centimeters and then 11 centimeters. Our formula that we use for the area of a rectangle is length times width. Now, these are two different sides. If I was doing that they're the same side, it would be a square, which would be the same number, 14 times 14, or 14 squared. That's how we get the square formula, which is side squared. But that's yesterday. Today, we're going to be doing this formula, and we have 14 as one length times 11, which is its width. And if I were to calculate that, I would get an area of 154. And my unit for area is units squared. So since I'm using centimeters, it would be centimeters squared. So that's very important. Remember that you need to have that label, whatever you're measuring with, squared, and that they're both the same unit. Now, what about a triangle? Now, if I look at this for a moment, a triangle then, if I were to look at this here, a triangle, if I were to create one out of this rectangle, I'm just trying to make one here for a moment. It looks like a triangle can be made by half of this rectangle. So if I were to try to figure out the space of half of that, I could just simply do my length times my width and then cut that area in half. So I want to divide it by 2. And so what I could do is I could do 11 times 14, that's 154. And then divide that by 2, and I would get something like 77. Okay, so that would give me 77 centimeters squared. Well, the way that we did that was precisely the way that we find the area of all triangles. It's using the formula for a rectangle and then dividing it in half. And here's the official formula here. It would be my base. So if I were to look at this, my base then would be this bottom. I usually use that, but sometimes it can be. And the height, which if it's a right triangle, it would be like this height here. This would be your h, my height. This would be my base. Or if I have something like this where there's no line for a height, it would be from the center point on the top, and then you draw a line down, and that would be my height. And then the bottom would be my base, okay, whatever that base would be there. And what I do is I have the base times my height divided by 2, just like I did here. I did my base, which would be 14 because down here would be 14 too, my height, and then we just cut that rectangle in half. So I divided by 2. So formally, our formula would be, if I look here, here are your notes from what we had. Our formula would be one of 2 ways. I can do base times height divided by 2. Sorry, that looks really awful. Or I could do 1/2 base times height. Whichever way is most comfortable for you. If you like to take the length and the height, or the base times the height, and then divide it by 2, that's fine. Or just take one of the sides and cut it in half ahead of time. So what you'll end up with is you'll end up with a half of one of the lengths. And so then you would just take that half and then multiply by 2. So let's take a look at it here. I got a triangle here that is 6 as a height and 8 centimeters as its base. And so what we would do is we would take our formula, we write 1/2 base times height. Oh, that looks awful. So I'm going to take it here. 1/2, I have my formula, 1/2 base times height. And so I'm going to plug in my things there. 1/2 of b is, my base is 8, so 1/2 of that is 4. So I could do 1/2 times my base, which is 8, times my height, which is 6. Now I could do this ahead of time. 1/2 of 8 is 4, times 6. That's going to equal 24. Now let's see if it makes sense if I do base times height divided by 2. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So we'll do base times height, which is my base is 8, times my height of 6 equals 48. Now 48, I'm going to divide it by 2, and that's going to give me 24. I got the same thing. It works. Now we also got to remember our formula label, right? Since it's area, it's centimeters squared. Here would be centimeters squared. So either way that you attack it, it's still the same thing. So let's do this other one here. I'm going to use a calculator, so I'll need my handy dandy calculator. We'll pop that over here. And I'm going to move it down here so it doesn't get covered. And I'm going to do 16 times 16. And I get 256. Now I'm going to divide it by 2. And I get 128. And since we are measuring in hectometers, we're going to do hectometers squared. And I'll put that right across here. But because we ran out of room, I put it underneath. And so we got our answer. Want to make sure that we know that. And so that's how we figure out the area of a triangle. I take my rectangle formula, length times width. I'm going to name the length a little bit different. We call that the base, the bottom, the base of that triangle. Think about the base. I usually think like the bottom of a building or something like that. And then my height, and then I cut it in half, divided by 2. So that's how we figure out a triangle's area.